Alayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bhedu Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Gukarastu Andakaro Vai Rukarastu Nivartakaha Andakara Nirodhitvat Gururitya Vidhiyate Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyabam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Vedas Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namah Shri Shankarananda Guru Padam Bhujanmane Savilasa Mahamoha Graha Grace Grasaika Karmane. So let us begin with the chapter 11 out of the 5 chapters, 11 through 15. And I think the way I propose to approach these so many verses, 400-500 verses, is I'll spend some time reviewing maybe 4 or 5 dozen verses. I did that today. I quickly went over about 50 verses and then chose from it 5 or 6 or 7 verses that kind of hang together because it's not a criticism of the authors, who am I to criticize them, but they have a much broader audience that they are writing it for, including some people who are belonging to other sampradayas, other spiritual disciplines, Bauddhas, Jainas, Karmakandins, and so they have to bring in their viewpoint and to address it. I think for this audience I am not going to do that. I assume you are all loyal students of Advaita Vedanta, and so I will do a much more narrow focus on the subject matter. And I would say that you have the option to read the verses that I am not taking up. You can just do it on your own. So you always have that option. Or you can just follow me, and then we can review these five chapters in a much more focused manner. So anyway. All right, so we'll begin with verse number 2 of the 11th chapter. And I assume that you can follow Swami Swahanandaji's book, which you have a digital copy of, or you may have a hard copy as well. I think I would recommend that you do get, it's not that expensive, and you can get one from Amazon for your own library. I think one of the things that has been extremely useful to me is to maintain a library so that I can go back to the same texts after a while. So do it again and again. So owning those books, I think, is very, very useful. So if you can, then please purchase those books as well. Okay, so we'll begin with verse number 2, which says, Brahmavit paramapnoti shokam tarati atmavit Raso Brahma Rasam Labdva Nandi Bhavati Na Anyatha. Brahmavit Paramapnoti Shokam Tarati Cha Atmavit Raso Brahma Rasam Labdva Anandi Bhavati Na Anyatha. So it means that the knower of Brahman obtains the ultimate and crosses over the problems of life. Shokam tarati means it crosses over, meaning that they no longer touch him. And so the second line is Raso Brahma, Brahma Rasaha. So Rasaha here means the joy, the Ananda. Like when you have a drink which is so pleasant, how you enjoy it, so enjoyment. So the nature of Brahma is enjoyment. It is Rasaha. Rasam Labdva, obtaining this joy, Anandi Bhavati Na Anyatha. Alone, so here it means that only by directly tasting the rasa of Brahma, you become Brahma, you become rasa, you become Ananda Swarupaha, na anyatha. No other way of achieving this paramam. Paramam here means the ultimate, niratishayam. Because we all have joys of life that are of varying degrees. And so you can obtain them as we will discuss them as we go along. But if you want the best, and best how? What is the meaning of best? It's not as though it's some kind of a special ananda. This is why I think that in our teaching, Swami Dayanandaji's teaching and so on, we stay away from words like bliss. You stay away from it. And you will see Swami Swahananda, they are different sampradayas, they have their own way of expressing, so it's not as though they don't understand. But the words that they use can be confusing. So for example, Swami Dayananda also had said that the word bliss means, it could mean in the way we do that, is something more than what our Ananda can give us. It's something beyond Ananda, some kind of a heavenly bliss. So I've seen occasional references on television by the New Age gurus. They'll say, this is you get some bliss. So everybody says, wow, that is amazing. How do I get those? You, of course, are talking about it, so you must know about it. But how do I get it? And so they say, oh, well, just follow me. Just go to write down your name and just send some money also. So these words really can confuse. There is only one Ananda, as we will be studying. It's not multiple Ananda. There are degrees of Anandas. Yes, we will study that as well. Of course, there is degrees of Ananda. We will make that very clear. But in its purest form, it is just the very Swarupa of Ananda. So that is Param. So when you say Param, what does it mean? Because Param obviously means the best. So what do you mean by best? Does it not mean some kind of a good, better and best Ananda? So what's wrong with saying that it's bliss? What's wrong with saying bliss is that it is the same Ananda, but the word Param means there are no limitations to it. It is an independent Swarupa. Independent Swarupa. And so This will come up in some of the discussions. We will defer up to that point. And so what it means is, param means there is no desha, there is no circumscription of place, nor of time, nor of vastu. It is independent. This is what param means. It's not as though there is some kind of a gradation. It is the same ananda, but the difference is that your and my anandas are highly limited. You enjoy for a while, and then the effect goes. So it is affected by time or affected by place. So, for example, you find that if it is very hot outside, then you prefer shade. If it is cold outside, you prefer sun. So it is dependent on where you sit. Your ananda depends on where you sit or what time you do it. So these are all conditional ananda. Param, on the other hand, means independent. This is what param means. Okay, so now we can finish this sentence. So he says, Brahmavit paramapnoti shokam tarati cha atmavit, means that the knower of Brahman crosses over samsara, all the problems consisting of samsara. So here Swami Maheshananji had said, this is an important thing to see. Samsara does not have problems. Samsara is problematic. It's not as though samsara gives you. Samsara itself has. Samsara means all the varying experiences of our life, changing, continuously changing. That's what samsara is. So it doesn't mean that the changingness is a separate entity from shokam, from the sorrow. The shokam is not a derivative of samsara. The samsara itself is shokam. Beautiful. And so, the Atmavit crosses over samsara or all the problems. Now the first line, please make a note of it. The first line technically means that you cease to have problems. Correct. Chokam tarati means that you are crossing over the sea of problems. So what it could mean is that you do not have dukkha. You don't have any pain. You don't have any sorrow. Right? That's what it means. But it doesn't mean that you have positive joy. So sometimes, it's interesting that you were expecting something bad, and you don't get it, and you find that you're okay. You were expecting something bad, it did not happen, so you are now okay. Your being okay doesn't mean that you have a positive experience. That positive experience is the second line. So it just means, for example, supposing you were expecting something bad and it didn't happen, so now you are relieved. But when you eat ice cream on top of that, then you get some positive joy. So the second one, the first one is the negation of the negativity, and the second one is the obtainment of the positivity. Is the way it should be looked at. I was listening to a British humor. So there is a comedian in England. I don't know, his name was not visible to me. So he was making fun of the Britishers. he was saying that when you go to America or you go to Australia, he was the two countries that he named, and you ask somebody, how are you doing? And the answer is awesome. Awesome. How was yesterday? Awesome. Awesome. I'm feeling awesome. This is the response you get. The British feelings are, it is the absence of the negative. He says if you ask the average Britisher, how are you feeling? He'll say, not so bad. He goes on talking about not so bad. Means that it could have been a lot worse, but I'm actually relieved that it's not so bad. So not so bad is the first line. Brahmavit paramapnoti shokam tarati cha atmavit. Then the second one is awesome. Raso brahma rasam labdva anandi bhavati na anyatha. Now anyatha is an important word. It means until you know Brahman, you cannot reach Param by any other means. Na karmana na prajaya dhanena tyage naike amritattvamanashu parena nakam mihitam guhayam vibhrajate yatyatayo vishanti. Like that. So nad karmana na dhanaha, by any karma, you cannot reach Param. You can only reach Aparam. So anyway, so this is the sentence. Now this sentence, number 2, should be considered as the opening statement of this 5 chapters. So this is what is called Upakrama. Remember we were through the Shadlinga Vichara. Upakrama and Upasamhara, and then you have Abhyasa, Apurvata, etc. in the middle. But the very beginning is, the first line is the main essence of these 5 chapters. It is exactly like a speaker saying, okay, welcome everybody, we are now going to spend some 1 hour talking about this subject. What I'm going to tell you is this. So this is why I think sometimes I really urge all the students not to be late in the class, because the habits of the Vedanta teachers, as we have been taught through our teachings and so on, is begin the class with, here is what I'm going to tell you, Upakrama. And at the end of the class, do Upasamhara. Even though the classes are a continuity, no doubt about it, but within the continuity there is some sufficiency in each stage. This is done in all of the Bhagavad Gita is exactly the same. Pancadasi is exactly the same. You will see that the chapter is complete in itself. If that's all you want to study, you will get a very good idea of Upakrama, Upasamhara, Abhyasa, Purvata, etc., Prashansa, logic, everything. But there is another circle following it, and so there is some continuity, but there is also a self-sufficiency in each one of them. Anyway, so this is a sentence of Upakrama which says, listen, please understand that without knowing yourself, which you are missing at this point, you cannot reach the ultimate joy. That's what it really means. Now it has to prove it, but it first has to make a statement. You can write it down and say, okay, this is what is being said. Okay, now how? Why? What about this? What about that? All of that is in the discussion, but at least initially you must say that. So this is the chapter for that. Okay, now as I promised, I'm going to jump to verse number 7. Again, this is an experiment. I mean, I know there are gaps in between and so on, but hopefully you will have some pulses. These would be pulsed, and then you can draw a line. This is like one point here and one point there, and you can draw a line, and hopefully at the end of this whole class you will still see a pattern of some kind. Excuse me. I'm actually feeling a lot better, but my vocal cords are still affected, which will take a little while. It should be okay also. So we are going to jump to the next verse, which is number 7. Okay. And it says, Bhidyate hridaya granthihi chidyante sarva samshayaha Kshiyante cha asya karmani tasmin drishte paravare. Okay, so this is an Upanishadic from Mundaka Upanishad, which many of you have already studied. Bhidyate hridaya granthi chidyante sarva samshayaha Kshiyante cha asya karmani tasmin drishte paravare. So paravare means the one which is param, same Brahman. By doing a directly seeing Brahman, sakshat karanam. So we will talk a lot about sakshat karanam. So this is what it means. It means one which is aparoksham and sakshat aparoksham Brahma. And so what is the meaning of that? I think we will. I think you know that pretty much already, but we will revise it and go over that some other time. So he says, when you see yourself as Brahman, then the knots of your heart, which are in the form of doubts about the veracity of your being Brahma, will be gone. You will actually cut the knots of the heart, and we will see what the knots of the heart are. This is a revision, we've already done that in other places. And kshiyante cha asya karmani. And then the effect of anything that you feel you are doing, because our bandhanam, our sense of being bound, is based on the fact that I am a karta and a bhokta. Kartritvam and bhoktritvam is bandhakatvam. Ultimately, this is what happens. And when you remove the doubts by cutting aside the knots of the heart, and we will explain what a knots of the heart means. When that happens, then this bandhanam, that I am a karta, I am a bhokta, I am a samsari, in other words, meaning I am a karta, I am a bhokta means I am a samsari, that goes completely out. You are no longer bound by the bindings of kartritvam and bhoktritvam. Alright, so this is the sentence. Now the question is, what is the meaning of this sentence? Why are we talking about it? Okay. So here, the uniqueness of Vedanta should be appreciated. Okay. And here's what we mean by the uniqueness of Vedanta. And so, if you look at the earlier part of the Vedas, which is Karmakanda. Karmakanda means a sense of worship, a sense of yajna, a sense of prayers, a sense of dependency on the devatas, the sense of going to the temple, all of that which is prescribed in a very technical manner. You can do karma at home, but if you wanted to really do it in a very technical manner, then you better resort to a pandit who knows how to do it. I've already explained to you before. Swami Dayananji put this dichotomy between doing it on your own and going into a temple to do it, as it is in film music versus technical music, means classical music. In the classical music, you cannot just do it on your own, you have to follow the ragas. I remember this so well. One time I was in Anaikatti at Mahashivaratri. And as you know, one of the traditions of many ashrams, many teachings is the following. Certainly in Swami Dayanand's case, there is a starting of a morning puja and then an ending of the Shivaratri before the night begins. In between, there is a continuous chanting of Om Namah Shivaya. Continuous. It should not be broken. Not be broken. And of course, you cannot sing Om Namah Shivaya. I guess you can, but it's not easy to sing for 14 hours at a time. So what we used to do, what was done for us was on a bulletin board, a sign-up sheet was given, where you would opt to become a leader of 15 minutes. And then other people can join you. You're not the only one. It could be that you will be the only one, but generally there are more people. And as soon as the old group finishes, they will raise their hand saying, this is the last time I'm doing it. And then you begin. Om Namah Shivaya. And so I think I opted for 2 segments, 15-minute segments during the day. And of course there was a lot of other people. And you soon realize that the patterns of doing Om Namah Shivaya are very limited, at least for a person who is not trained on classical music. So you can say, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om. So you can vary the tone to a certain degree. You can go up and down. So when we were listening to some people, there were 2 or 3 ladies, older ladies, when they led, their singing was so beautiful. It's amazing how they varied the tone. It's the same Panchakshari plus Om. Om Namah Shivaya, there's nothing more. But the way they would vary the tone of Om Namah Shivaya was something wonderful to see. And so I remember this so well. After completing one such segment by this lady, I approached her and I said, that was very enjoyable. How did you do this? You know what she told me? She said, I am a classical music teacher. You have no idea how many ragas I know and how I can invoke these ragas for doing Om Namah Shivaya. That's what it is. So then I realized what Swami Dayananji was saying. You need training. You need knowledge and you need training. Then it becomes so beautiful. So here, the Karmakandins are the ones who know technically how to do puja, how to do yagas, and etc., etc. But you can do karma on your own also. It's not as though it won't be as effective as going to a trained pujari, but you can do it. But now, here's what I was saying. In Karma Kanda means the approach in life where karma is pradhana. What you do is principle. It is the main thing. Whether you do it yourself by training yourself or you resort to a very knowledgeable priest to the local temple, that may be there are some differences between them. But both of them have the following view, particularly the Pandits. It's not as though I have had detailed discussions about it. I can just tell you what our acharyas say. But if you really look at the Karmakandins, here's what they say. So you see the topic that I am going, don't forget what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the uniqueness of Vedanta. Keep that that's the upakrama of this minor subject. The uniqueness of Vedanta. So what do you mean by that? This is what we mean. When you go to the temple and you have a discourse with the very, very learned, because this is Agama Shastra. It has a lot of background. There's a lot that you have to study. You have to study Nyasa, and you have to study so many different mantras. I don't even know. I'm not an expert in that. But you have to really do. One time I remember this was in 2020 when I was in Swamiji's village in southern India. And so Srini Raman was also there. And he took me to a couple of chatralayas. And he also took me to a school where chanting the Vedas, it's a Veda Pathshala. And so the chanting and the knowledge of the Vedas was being imparted to these youngsters. The youngsters were all from 8 or 10 years old up to 17, 18, 19 years of age. Youngsters. They were all sitting there. And so they chanted something for us for about 15, 20 minutes, half hour, whatever time. So I was curious. I turned to the teacher. I said, tell me, how long? And by the way, these were all extempore. They are not listening to a book. They were just chanting with their eyes closed or at least not looking at anything. So I was asking them, how long can they do this without really consulting the book? Approximately how long? I was curious. You know what the answer was? I think it was 18 hours. 17, 18, 19, something like that. These kids can chant without looking, just from memory, 18 hours of chanting. Just incredible. Now I'm to a point where I can chant maybe, I don't know, maybe half hour, maybe 40 minutes. So maybe a little bit more. So I can chant Rudram, I can chant Purusha Suktam, I can chant Rudra Suktam, I can chant Medha Suktam, I can chant the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, and I can chant a couple of Vallis of Taittiriya Upanishad, Brahmananda Valli. And of course I keep forgetting. If I don't practice, which I don't get time to practice, I don't retain it. But except for Rudram and a few other, I can retain that easily. So I can do it for maybe 40 minutes at the most, whereas these youngsters can do that for 18 hours. So going back to the uniqueness of Vedanta, if you talk to these Veda Pathshala people who are teachers of yajnas and doing pujas and so on, and you tell them what is it that will emancipate a person, you know what they will say? Karma. Karma will emancipate people. Means that karma and karma phala. So karma is supreme to a point that I don't know if all, but many of the karmakandins don't even think about Ishvara. They look at some specific devatas. So I wouldn't say, because our pandits, they know Dakshinamurti and so on and so forth, Ganesha, etc. But many of the priests don't think there is a need for Ishvara. There is no need for it because the Vedas, karmas will give you the phalam, will give you the results. That's all that matters. So there is a friend of mine who lives in a retirement home in Los Altos nearby. So just recently, in the last 2-3 weeks, she gave me a telephone call and said, I need to talk to you. So I said, sure, what do you want to talk about? She said she lives in a retirement community which is mostly Westerners with a few sprinklings of Indians, Asians, and so on. Few of them, but mostly Christians from the West, from America. And she said they have invited me to give a talk on Hinduism. So I had a question about that and I wanted to ask you about it. So I said, fine, what is your question? She said, as I understand it, in the Christian religion, a lot of importance is given to grace by the Almighty. Almighty. What you need is the grace. And there are other people she has heard, and this is true for Muslims also, that they want the grace of Allah. So she was saying that this is what I have been, I don't know whether she's talked to anybody or read it or what, but she says this is what my understanding of Christianity and Islam is. What is the situation with us? Is it grace or is it karma? Good question, really. And this is where the uniqueness of Vedanta, not of the entire set of the Vedas, because everybody has a slightly different view. But the nuanced view of Vedanta is to be understood. So here, Swami Maheswaranji had talked about this, and I have also. You may recall this. If it is purely based on karma, then you don't need a conscious person on the other side to give you the results. It'll be a little bit like throwing a rubber ball against a wall, as we all used to do when we were young. It was a very favorite thing. So we would just throw the ball, either just by ourselves or we have another person, and so we do it in tandem. And the velocity of the ball and how it comes back is purely dependent on the person throwing the ball. The wall was there as an inert object, and it simply reflected back whatever your efforts were in the form of a result, isn't it? There was no variation. It's not saying the one time the wall ate the ball, absorbed it and didn't throw it back. Other time it was ferocious in rebounding. No. If there is some differences in rebounding, it is because of the velocity and the angle of throwing the ball on the part of the person throwing the ball. The wall by itself didn't play any part in doing so. It just stood there. So that means that if you say that karma alone will dictate, you mean to say that Ishvara is like an inert wall that has no role to play in determining the results for you. No role to play whatsoever. That's not true. That's not true. So does it mean that other religions who say that it all depends upon the grace of God, and I don't know if I'm putting words in their mouth or not, but the implication is that the grace of God is by far the primary determinant of the results, and your own karma plays a very minor role. Like, for example, if you accept Christ as a savior, or you accept Muhammad as the savior, then really all your karmas are forgotten and you will be accepted, and that is called the grace of God. So this is our understanding. It may be a flawed understanding, but that's an understanding. So in the case of Vedanta, this is a nuanced view, and here is the view. The view is, as expressed by Swami Maheswaranji, which again I think I am repeating myself, we had gone over this in some other ways, and he gives an example, a very nice example. The example is that of a shop owner who has a regular crew supporting the running of the shop throughout the year, but in the time of the festival season of Diwali, Just like Christmas time in the West, things go berserk. There is an inordinate amount of work that needs to be done. A lot of business comes in. You have to respond quickly, and just your regular skeleton crew doesn't do it. You either have to hire new people, or you have to most probably extend the timing of your regular people. You can say, we need you to work 14 hours a day for the next month, not just 8 hours a day. So supposing there is a worker. So let's say the shop owner has two or three people that he's talking to. And he says, Diwali is coming, as you know, and that means all of us have to work hard, and you will be, I would ask you to probably stay for at least 10 hours, 12 hours, sometimes even 14 hours for time, and I hope you can agree. But you decide how much you want to work. And so there may be a person who says, you know what, I cannot stay any more than 8 hours. I cannot bend any more than that. That's a long day for me. I've got other things to do. I cannot stay. I'm just going to do 8 hours a day. So that person gets paid for 8 hours. Another person comes to him and said, sir, you know what? You have been my employer for the last 10 years. You know me by now. I am very indebted to you. And this means everything to me. 14 hours, 12 hours, whatever it is, I'm used to do this. I'm going to give up I'll tell my spouse to take care of the children, and for 1 month I'm okay with doing it. Just tell me what to do. So now that person gets paid for, let's say, 12 hours. Same wages, 8 hours, maybe some overtime. So this is what is called karma-based results. How many hours you work, you multiply it by so many rupees per hour, and you give the wage to them. But now, time comes to give some bonus at the end of the year, Diwali bonus. Okay? And it's quite a hefty bonus. And you don't have to give it, but you should. Like my wife does, she has so many vendors that she works with throughout the year, and she gives them a reasonable amount of tip. But at the end of the year, she now at Christmas time goes through a list and says, I need to give this person this much more dollars because of the Christmas bonus. And she just goes through and says, my God, this person was so responsive to me throughout the year. So she has to think about it. So it's like a wall. It's a conscious person doing it. Or she can tell someone, I think that give me a lot of problems during the year. And I'll give them some bonus, but not the maximum amount of bonus. So she does this every year. In fact, last year, we found out from everyone that they expect to get Amazon certificates by email. That's the best way to do it. And that we ran into some problems because some of our emails were wrong and it went to the wrong people. We had to call Amazon. Anyway, that's a separate story altogether. But here's the point. In Vedanta, we are unique because our karma phala is normally based on karma, but not necessarily so. And what do you mean by not necessarily so? means that if I have an attitude towards Ishvara, that whatever you ask me to do, I will do it. And do it with not a grudging heart, but with delight in my mind. Then the results are not necessarily based on karma, they are based on the grace of Ishvara. So my advice to my friend was, in the short time that I had to explain this, I have had, you know all of this by now, but I had to tell her that it's neither one nor the other. It's not completely karma based and it's not completely based on grace. But what it means is normally you get what you put in. But if your bhava, your love, your commitment is over and beyond what is expected of you, then you can get results that are far exceeding your own expectations. Swami Dayananda used to say that. He says, that an initiative, I'll never forget this, very good advice from him. An initiative is very valuable to a person, should be very valuable to a person. Why? Because an initiative means you don't have to do it, but if you took upon yourself to initiate something, Ishvara knows this is not something that I asked him to do. It is over and beyond what was expected from him. And so the results of that are extraordinary. That's why I always tell my students and to myself, take some initiatives, because those are very valuable to yourself and to us as well. So now going back to this verse, this is how the connection is, because now we are saying, why are we talking about all this? So here it means what needs to happen is you have to take the initiative to complete the inquiry into Vedanta. So this is what is called, as we have talked about this is what is called Atma Kripa. So you have Ishvara Kripa, you have Shastra Kripa, you have Guru Kripa, and then it is Atma Kripa. And as the Upanishads also says, just by listening and studying, you will not complete the journey. The last mile. It's like you ask Comcast to extend their services to close to your neighborhood. This is what happened to us. It took us a while for 3-4 neighbors to come in and ask them to please extend it. I'm very lucky. There's a couple of neighbors who are so rich that they actually paid a good part of the laying out of the Comcast. This is several years ago, 6-7 years ago. Comcast high-speed internet. But then, from the street to the house, which is like 200 feet in our property, I had to pay for it. I had to take the initiative. I had to contact them, beg to them. And it was a very interesting how they dug with a machine. I don't know if you've ever seen this or not. I really enjoyed as an engineer. So what they do is, So we have a driveway which is sloping at about, I don't know, it's a pretty steep. It's about maybe 25%, maybe 22%, something like that. So the street level is below, and then you go up the driveway. And so what they did was they dug a hole and a trench, I think roughly 3 feet, 2.5, 3 feet below the ground at the street level. Then they have a boring machine that creates a bore through which the cable is strung all the way to the same depth along with the surface. And so they have a machine that tells them to maintain that distance. And it didn't take them that long. I think I was there for like maybe half hour, even less, maybe 20 minutes. And this boring machine went all the way up to the top of the driveway. And then it was all done. And so all they had to do was to string this. And I had to pay for this. They took some time. They had to do some connection. It was debugged, all of that. Anyway, what it means is that until you made the connection right up to your own garage, you will not get the high-speed internet. And so what this verse means is the necessity for self-help. If we, I see this in many of the students who enjoy listening to classes by the various Swamis, Swami TV, Swami Viditatmananda, Swami Paramarthananda. They enjoy it and they learn and so on. But what I also see happening is that they think that's all that is necessary. I'm not overstating it. That I just, this is where Swami Dayananda used to say that please don't be a perennial student, just listening and to different classes and so on. You really have to think about closing the gap. And I know most of you are doing that. But what it means is that you have to do vichara. You have to do vichara. Vichara means thinking. And this is what mananam is all about. And until you do that, all that learning and studying and memorizing and chanting and so on will wait until you bring it home to yourself. So bringing it home here means that you assiduously clear the doubts in your own mind. So this is what this verse talks about, is that vidyante hridaya granthi. So the knots of the heart have to be broken off. So what is meant by the knots of the heart? So Swami Maheshananji points this out so very well. He says, so what a knot does is that each segment of a string by itself cannot do it. Combined together and making a knot out of them, you are able to do things. You cannot do it separately because each of the strings is incomplete, but you extend it by making a knot. I know when I was a youngster, I used to go to a scouting class, scout. And so we learned different kinds of knots. It's very useful. It's called a reef knot, where you twist it one way and then you make a double knot. And then it becomes very tight. The more you pull out, the stronger it becomes. So here what is said is that a normal average person has two segments to his or her personality, two strings. One is the conscious me. Whether you look at the conscious me accurately is a different matter, but we are aware of the fact this is me, the conscious me. So this is one segment. And the other segment is my mental capability, my thinking, my reacting, my responding. These are the two segments. So the average person thinks, average meaning the one that has not yet been taught and has not yet understood. So the thinking is that by a combination of my conscious self and my mind, I'm able to go about doing things. I'm complete now. If either one of them is missing, then something is wrong. If my mind is not there, then I cannot think, I cannot do anything. And of course, if I am not there, who is a conscious being, where is the question of the mind being able to do it itself? So I need both of them, and they're all interconnected. This turns out to be a fallacy. This is a fallacy. How is it a fallacy? Because I take myself to be a worldly person, a transactional person. I have to transact with the world. I look upon myself as a person who is born to transact. I have to do something. People expect me to do things. I've got responsibilities. I've got aspirations. So this is what I mean, that I am a living, transactional person. And for doing that, I need both of them, both myself as well as my mind. The real question is, are you really a transactional person? Do you need to be a transactional person? Vyavaharika Sat. Of course, everybody will say, what do you mean? What else can I be? I'm a human being, either a male or a female, with a particular skin, some father, mother, and this is what my life is all about. This is me. Are you sure? Think about it. And when one does vichara according to the instructions of the Shastra, you find you don't need to be a transactional person. You are in fact a person And as a person, you are complete, with or without a mind. You don't need a mind. You don't need thoughts. You need thoughts if you want to be a transactional person. You don't need thoughts if you are. You don't need thoughts, period. Not if you are. You just don't need thoughts. Well, how do you say that? This is what I'm just picking out from some of the verses that are going to come. And I'm going so slow that I may not be able to even cover the 5 or 6 verses that I was thinking of, but this is the trend. This is useful to review it ahead of time because I know what direction the text is going, and I'm just giving you a gist of that. So, how do you say that I'm not a transactional person? It's very clear that when you are in deep slumber, are you a transactional person? Oh, well, I'm asleep. What do you mean? Of course I'm not a transactional person when I'm asleep. But that's only when I'm asleep. Hey, don't you know this is a very important thing? You can be a non-transactional person. And as these verses point out in terms of analyzing Ananda, in fact, when you are a non-transactional person, you are the happiest. You see, if one says that, gee, if you're basically a transactional person with activity and participation and so on, and if you cease to be, you will miss it. And you will really want to go back to being a transactional person. You don't want to be a non-transactional person. If that would be the case, then I can see that the non-transactional person means that I am not complete. I'm wanting. But it turns out just the opposite. As this will show in this chapter, that you love to sleep. Love to sleep. Why? Because you are a one without a second. You are dvaita rahitaha. You are advaitaha. And you are swayam prakasha. And you are Ananda Swarupa, close to Ananda Swarupa, as close as a state can give you. So this is breaking the Hridaya Granthi. So how does it break the Hridaya Granthi? It means you don't need both the consciousness as well as the mind in order to be happy. You don't. Because that is really what my normal assumption is. Because there, just yourself without the mind is enough. And in fact, the mind does not play a decisive role In deep sleep, you are without a mind, you are okay. In fact, you are better off. And in the dream state and in waking state, you are okay with the mind. You can be okay with the mind. Normally you are not. But there are instances where you are okay with the mind. So what it means is that the mind, it does not play a decisive role, and you can cut it. You need not cut it, but you can cut it if you want to. So that thinking, that vichara of bringing the deep sleep state, of bringing the swapnavastha and thinking about it and confronting the world in a very forceful manner is what is the last mile that one has to do. Just by reactive listening and so on and so forth, it doesn't do it. So this is the importance of this particular verse. That until, if you want the grace of the Ishvara, if you want the grace of the Ishvara, going beyond karma, that's why it says, kshiyante cha asya karmani. Then all the prarabdha karmas and everything just becomes meaningless, because you can see yourself independent from any effect of the world. Because all the karmas can do is to modify the experience of samsara. That's all. It cannot touch the Atma. And the knots of the heart, therefore, is a sense of doubt. Really, I can be dependent? Because you find that you are so used to seeing yourself as a samsari that these doubts don't go easily. And Swami Maheswaranji also used to say, not used to, it does says it continuously, Swami Dayanand too, that after you have studied the matter clearly, you have been taught well by a knowledgeable teacher, and you also have been very attentively listening to it, taking notes, and you're saying absolutely yes and so on. Due to your habitual doubt, you will say something. But see, how can we live? I was giving you examples that Swami Maheswaranji used to say. Swamiji, I know the Vedanta says satyam, always say truth, and always do the right thing. But Swamiji, the thing is that you cannot live in this life surrounded by so much corruption. You cannot do it. Swamiji says, if this is not a degrading doubt to the veracity of Satyam, I don't know what else is. This is the height of doubt that kills you, kills your Shraddha. Swamiji says, I confront this every day. In satsang, Swamiji will say, Swamiji, that was a great lecture. This is Swami Maheswaranji saying. That was a great discourse. Oh my God, that's so wonderful. But Swamiji, think about our life. Think what I have to go through. I have to bribe the policeman, I have to bribe this person and so on. And so Swamiji will say, yeah, you're okay, I understand. Inside he says, idiot, you are basically negating everything that you are hearing. As though Ishvara doesn't know what he's talking about. Satyam, Satyam, Satyam. But if in reality people are corrupt, that means there is no Satyam. I think I was at a social get-together. We were talking about how I turned vegetarian. I remember that. So we had Swamiji, Swami Chinmayananji at our house in Los Gatos. This is before I met Swami Dayananda. I was there with Swami Chinmayananji for 2 years. And I was listening to him very sincerely, and I was just blown away. I mean, his lectures on Gita, and then we did Atma Bodha, and that we did this, all kinds for 2 years. And one time we had invited them at our house for Bhiksha, and we had a lot of friends over. And somehow the talk came for vegetarianism. And so Swamiji was talking about, he has his own pet reasons for why you should be vegetarian, especially if you're a student of Vedanta. And I'm so happy I opened my mouth and blurted out. I said, Swamiji, but see, the thing is, it is very difficult for me to be a vegetarian. And if those of you that know Swami Chinmayananji, he was a father figure, and he had a temper in that sense, a very feigned temper, not a real temper. But Swami Dayananji would not do something like this. So he turned to me and he says, why are you talking like this? What's your reason for not becoming a vegetarian? Why? So I said, Swamiji, I'm in sales and I cannot do this. And so he just turned to the whole audience and as a reprimand to me and said, people can make any kind of excuses. If you want to just do that, what is the use of just listening all this? This is exactly what Swami Maheshananji was saying. That if you really think that on one hand you put, oh, this is all Satyam and so on, but Swamiji, I am living in a real world. So what does that mean? That means it's not Satyam. When are you going to do Satyam? And this means Chidyante sarva samshaya. These are the doubts that hold you from really becoming free. Because you say, well, all this is good, but the thing is that one has to be a practical living. Practical living means it is good to be a Jivan Mukta, but I'm okay the way I am. Just a limited. Okay, then do stop studying then. Why are you studying that I am an unlimited person? Oh, it's nice to study, but I don't think I can. So really speaking, this means you are not ready to cut the string and to understand that I am an independent person where the mind doesn't matter to me at all. You let that string cut away, and you are fine the way you are. Then your self-help will become ready and useful. Well, this teaches me something about our classes and so on. I don't know if this is good or bad, but I cannot but go into the depths of each verse that appeals to me, and so this is how we're going to do it. That means somehow our treatment of this will go slower, and I hope you're okay with it. If you are all thinking about that I must do first chapter in 8 or 10 classes and like this, may not happen, I don't know. But at least you'll get the gist of it in this manner. So I don't know, it's a learning experience for me also, and we will see. All right, with that I will close today's class and with a prayer and see whether you have any questions. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Keshav, just a response to you. I know you've been wanting to talk to me about that Gita that you have done. Give me some time. I need to review it, and then I will give you a call back about it. Okay? So please allow me some more time. So nice to see you all in the class, and happy you could join. I'll stay here for a few more minutes to see if you had any questions. Again, I extend my offer that if you had some questions about any topic in Vedanta that you are bothered about and have not received a proper understanding or a response, then please give me an email and I will be happy to bring it up in the class next time if others also can benefit from it, or at least just respond to you individually as the time, as the chance may be. So I don't see any other questions. So with that, I take your leave and we will hopefully see you next week. Hari Om.